Peugeot was the first company to build a car assembly plant in Nigeria.
This is the Peugeot, winner of the 2 major African rallies. Again.
By that time, the Nigerian economy was good. This was in the year 1975. $1 was not up to 1 naira. It was about 62 kobo. An average civil servant then could buy a brand new car or take up a government loan for a car.
When the road gets rough, don't forget, you're driving a winner.
Volkswagen would later come to Nigeria to build their own car assembly plant in Lagos. Nigerians were driving brand new cars then, and 20,000 naira could still build a good house. Back then, Nigerians can go to the Ministry of Labour office in Ikeja to ask for jobs. Remember, Lagos was still the capital of Nigeria.
My name is Peter, can you hear me?
How long have you been looking for work?
I'm looking for a job at 2 years from age now.
What type of work do you want to do?
I'm looking mechanic or any type of job.
It was during those years, in May 1973, that the National Youth Service Corps (NYSC) was established, and the first set of corps members were reported to be paid about 60 naira monthly, an amount enough to cater for their well-being. Back then, a return ticket from Lagos to London and back to Lagos cost a total of about 390 naira. By 1980, instead of the 62 kobo that dollar was in 1975, it went down further to 54 kobo, meaning that $1,000 then was about 540 naira. It was during this time in July 1980 that Mercedes started producing trucks in Enugu. They called the factory Anamco, Anambra Motor Manufacturing Company. Back then, Enugu was the capital of Anambra State. It was in 1991 that more states were created in Nigeria, and Enugu became the capital city of the new Enugu state. This was the same year that Kogi and Delta states were created. Then, in December that same year of 1991, that was when Abuja became the capital of Nigeria. I know what you are thinking. How did we get to here? From producing cars, driving brand new cars, to now, we are struggling to import fairly and unfairly used cars, accidented cars. Remember, before Nigeria got our independence in 1960, agriculture was the major trade in the country. Apart from the groundnuts in the north, cocoa was exported from western Nigeria, and palm oil was in abundance in the east. Although by then, crude oil was already discovered in Nigeria in a town called Olo Ibiri, which is today in Bayelsa State. That was in the year 1956, 4 years before Nigeria became independent. But even with the oil, agriculture was still the major export from Nigeria. World oil trade then was dominated by a group called OPEC, Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, and Nigeria was not a member then. Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, and Iran were among the biggest exporters of oil in this group. It was in 1971 that Nigeria then joined OPEC to have some control over oil trade. 2 years after Nigeria joined, in 1973, something unexpected happened. War broke out between the Arab states and Israel. This war was called the Yom Kippur War or the Ramadan War. It was in October 1973, during the month of Ramadan. Remember, when OPEC was formed, Iran, Kuwait, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela were the first countries to become members of OPEC. Apart from Venezuela, all the other 4 countries are Arab countries. So in 1973, during this war, in order to avenge the way the United States was supplying arms to Israel and supporting Israel in the war, they placed an embargo on oil supply to the United States, mandating all Arab oil producers to stop selling oil to the United States.
If the Americans are thinking of a military action, this is also another possibility. But then this is a suicide.
What happens if the US resorts to force and occupies the oil fields in Saudi Arabia?
There are some sensitive areas in the oil fields in Saudi Arabia which will be immediately blown up.
By yourself? By your people?
Of course. And then what will happen is Europe has to live, and Japan, of course, has to live without oil from Saudi Arabia for so many years, because it takes years to repair that. It's not an overnight business, it's not a month or two.
Not just the United States, they also placed an embargo on oil supply to Netherlands, Portugal, South Africa, and any other country supporting Israel. They also reduced the quantity of oil they were producing then as a way of protest to create scarcity and pressure the other countries to speak up against the war. Immediately this happened, the price of 1 barrel of oil moved from $3 per barrel to $12 per barrel because of the scarcity. This scarcity became a problem for the American economy. Businesses began to go down.
People can no longer afford to run cars that do 12 miles to the gallon. Petrol stations can no longer afford to fill up cars whose tanks take 20 gallons. The American automobile, for so long the symbol of America's wealth and extravagance, is dying. New cars and used cars stand like shining tombstones in the showrooms and parking lots of the nation's car dealers, unloved, unwanted, and unsold.
This was the condition the embargo brought on the US economy. It would later become a blessing to Nigeria. Remember, before then, Nigeria was not a major exporter of oil, but the new oil price was so inviting. And these countries that were facing the oil embargo began to ask Nigeria for help. It means Nigeria needs to increase her production capacity to help supply oil to these countries. United States was one of those countries. This was how Nigeria took advantage of the massive demand for oil and became a major exporter. Unfortunately, the profit coming from oil due to rise in price became so good that the government began to neglect agriculture and the other sectors of the economy. At this time, by 1974, the naira gained more value. By 1975, it was about 62 kobo to $1. By 1978, it was 60 kobo to $1. And by 1980, it had gone down to 54 kobo to $1. It was during this time in 1975 that Nigeria built many tertiary institutions. The oil wealth brought a lot of infrastructural development. The University of Calabar, University of Ilorin, University of Maiduguri, University of Port Harcourt, and Usman Dan Fodio University, Sokoto, were all built during this time. University education then was extended to reach every region in Nigeria, not just universities. By the year 1976, Nigeria began to think, let us build a new capital city, somewhere on a virgin land, away from the heavy traffic of Lagos. Whatever it would cost, the country has enough money to do it. That was how they chose an area called Abuja to be the capital city of Nigeria. Then, Lagos was becoming too congested. They also considered that Abuja is at the center of Nigeria and it would be easier for anyone from any part of the country to visit Abuja than Lagos. From Maiduguri to Lagos is about 22 hours by road, but Maiduguri to Abuja takes only about 12 hours. They drafted the budget on what it would take, drew a master plan for the city, and because the money was available, construction started.
Barely 3 years ago, Nigeria began to build a new capital, here in the middle of the bush, miles from anywhere. So far, nearly £2 billion worth of contracts have been awarded to build the new city in this virgin land. And it's hard to imagine, looking from the roof of this uncompleted Sheraton hotel to the skeleton of another 5-star hotel in the distance. This will be the presidential palace. Complete with underground bunker, it will cost anything up to £150 million by the time it's completed.
But there is always one challenge in wealth management. If you fail to invest or save in a time of abundance, when hard time comes, you may lose all you have. This was unfortunately the situation with Nigeria. It was also during this time that the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway was constructed. That was in the year 1978. By that year, Obasanjo was the head of state of Nigeria.
Nigeria wishes to bring its manufactured products to the world market.
Fortunately, this sudden oil wealth brought massive development to Nigeria. Apart from the roads and the schools, it was during this time that Nigeria was truly the giant of Africa, contributing funds and materials for other African countries who were still under colonial rule to help them fight and get their independence. It was also then that Nigeria built a new terminal at the Murtala Mohammed Airport in Lagos and also lifted the face of the airport to meet international standard then. But before we could know it, by November 1973, the Ramadan war between the Arabs and Israel had stopped, and by the following year, the embargo on oil export to the US was lifted. Saudi Arabia and the other Arab countries began to export as much as they could, although that didn't affect the global oil price. The price was still as high as $35 per barrel by early 1980, and Nigeria was still exporting oil on a large scale. Then, by 1981, what economists described as oil glut suddenly happened. Due to massive supply of oil by the exporting countries, there was oversupply of oil in the global market. The price of oil crashed. Price fell from the $35 per barrel it was in 1980 to about $27 in 1981, and by 1986 it had fallen to below $10 per barrel. It came as a shock, and to explain it better using a slang in Nigeria, everywhere became blur. By then, the production of cocoa, rubber, cotton, groundnuts, palm oil had drastically reduced in the country due to how the government neglected those sectors of the economy and how younger Nigerians had sought for white-collar jobs in the oil companies and cities, leaving agriculture behind. By the same 1986, $1 suddenly rose to 2 naira 2 kobo from the 86 kobo it was in 1985. By 1987, it became 4 naira per dollar, and by 1988, it was already 4 naira 53 kobo per dollar.
I can only quote the governor of the Bank of England during one of his visits to Nigeria. He said it is easier to manage poverty than to manage affluence. The sort of newfound wealth in oil has brought in its trail a number of social problems. we have graft and corruption, inefficiency, because money is easily made.
By that 1986, when the dollar moved to 2 naira 2 kobo, remember, Nigeria was still building her capital city in Abuja. But due to the sudden economic change, the funds to pay the contractors became a problem. Work began to slow down.
As the work slows down, that the full extent of early mismanagement is becoming clear. Shoddy workmanship, overpriced contracts, and lack of coordination have all hit Abuja. Getting paid has become a real problem.
The contractor's going ahead, we are getting paid, but we're not getting paid as much as we should get paid. So obviously what happens is that you reschedule your program to take account of the amount of funds which have been made available at any one time.
There is no way to explain this than to say, what really happened was mismanagement. We forgot to save for the rainy days and invest in the right sectors. Corruption also took its own part in the process because there was huge oil wealth available. The unfortunate public officials began to steal as much as they could, and from there, Nigeria continued to go down till this very day. Today, $1 is more than 1,000 naira.
And in the last many years, you often heard, before the crisis came, you often heard the government officials saying, money is no object. So what happened is that the kind of discipline for planning which was required in government was dispensed with.
For you to understand the massive corruption that came in after then, not just the stealing of public funds, over-inflating project costs, and those negative things that kept us in this condition, take a look at this drama that was recorded around 1984, how a man was looking for a license to import cars into Nigeria. Because as of then, due to the economic condition, most Nigerians couldn't afford the brand new cars produced in the country. Fairly used cars began to arrive in Nigeria, although the government then decided to control the import of cars into Nigeria by giving import licenses to only few car dealers. But getting the license from the ministry in charge of the license was a problem.
The minister keeps referring me to the permanent secretary, who keeps referring me to the task force in charge of import licenses, who keeps asking me to come back every week. Yes, come in.
Are you Chief Ayoko of Ayoko Motors?
Yes, I am.
Excuse me. They told me at the ministry about you.
Yes.
I have an import license for 1,000 cars.
1,000 cars?
Yes. And it could be yours if you can pay the right price.
But don't you want to use it yourself?
Hey, Mickey, I am not a car dealer.
So, the people at the ministry who had failed to give the real car dealers the license already gave the license to some persons who are not in the business of importing cars. To cut the story short, she got the license to import 1,000 cars, and now she wants to sell the license to anyone who is ready and who can meet her demands.
Then how did you get it and I could?
The right connection and the right party card.
I have got the right connections too.
But you haven't got what I have got to give.
How much do you want for your import license?
1,000 naira for every car.
That will be 1 million naira.
Maybe you can add it to the price of your car. Anyway, here is my card.
So, the poor economic condition, which should have brought discipline in the Nigeria public service, began to bring more decay. The men who had stolen the big oil wealth continued to steal the remaining balance. There was no effective plan to save the naira. Today, we are still bearing the consequences of the mistakes of a few men, those who should have done better. Thank you so much for being there. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Your support means a lot to me. Thank you.